Hi, this is Jim DiGiovanni with DiGiovanni Design. Today I'm going to show you how to create this cool interlocking pattern in Adobe Illustrator. Let's get started. Okay, so the best way for us to start here is to, I'll make sure that we're all working with the same set of tools and settings here. So the first thing I'm going to do is suggest that whatever version of Illustrator you're using, I'm using Illustrator 2019. This is on a Mac. And I'm going to work inside a square artboard, and I never used to use multiple artboards, and I can't believe that I didn't do it before because it's just saves me so much time in as far as the way I work. So I suggest making sure you get familiar with how to use artboards if you don't know how. But the first thing we're going to do before we get to artboards is just reset our workspace. So I'm going to go under Windows, Workspace, and Reset Essentials Classic. So that just resets the Essentials workspace. And what we're going to be using mainly to build this is we are going to be using the layers palette, because you always use the layers palette, and the stroke palette. And if the stroke palette opens up and you don't see your options, you want to show your options. And I'm going to close these others. And then we're going to need the align palette. So Window, Align, and also the Pathfinder and the Transform palette. So I'm going to move the Pathfinder down there, and we'll drop the stroke palette right there, and we'll put the layers palette right here. Okay. Okay, so I have an artboard with just my color palette that I'm going to use here. And then I have the artboard that I'm going to build out from. And since we're creating a tileable pattern, I want to use a artboard that is symmetrical so that it's easier to, especially because I have these interlocking rings that we're doing. So I need to start with a 1-to-1 ratio. So select your artboard tool, and then I'm going to select my second artboard, and I'm just going to reset it from 8x10 to just a 5x5. So 5x5. So these three intersecting circles that we have, I've kind of worked out the dimensions for it, so we're just going to go through them quickly. We need to start with a circle. So I'm going to go to my tools palette and go down to my shape tool. You may have it set to rectangle or polygon. Make sure that you choose ellipse, and then I'm just going to double click. And it brings up the ellipse tool, and I've already set this to 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So 3x5 by 3x5. Say OK. And then we've got our first circle here. Now, with the align tool, this is really important. The align tool, you want to click on it, and you want to make sure that your align tool is set to align to artboard, not align to selection. We're using artboard in this case. So align to artboard, and then I am going to align this circle to right and top. Okay. Now I'm going to copy this, or I'm going to select this circle, and I'm going to make a copy of it by holding down Shift Option and just dragging it. And then the final circle, you can simply just copy and paste. Okay. And then this one we're going to align center and bottom. Okay, so these lines need to be a little bit thicker, and we need to assign the color. So on the one on the left, we're going to make it the green, the light green color. So I'm just going to use my eyedropper tool and choose that color, and then my circle on the right, I'm going to keep it the red color, and then the circle on the bottom, I'm going to choose the eyedropper and choose my tan color. So now I have these three circles. Now, a couple other things we need to do here. Select all three circles. You want to make sure that your stroke is set to align stroke. The default is usually align center. You want to make sure that it's aligned to the inside. And then we're going to increase the weight of the stroke to 24 point for this project. Okay, now how to make them look like they're interlocking. They're just not sitting on top of one another. So what I want to do is I want to select all three circles again. I'm going to turn these from strokes to objects, or strokes to shapes. If you turn off preview, on the Mac it's Command Y, you can see that these are just strokes right now. I'm going to convert these to shapes. So I'm going to say Object, Expand Appearance. Okay, now they're no longer strokes, they're shapes. And now that they're shapes, we can cut them apart. So I'm going to select my objects again, and I'm going to go to the Pathfinder tool, and I'm going to click Divide. Okay, now what's happened is it's created individual objects for each, wherever it intersects. Okay, undo that. So what I want to happen here is I want the green to go over the red, and then I want the red to go behind the yellow, and I want the yellow to go behind the red. So here I'm going to select the yellow, and I'm going to use the eyedropper tool and make it red. That works. They're interlocking now. You can kind of see that they're interlocking. We're basically ready to build the pattern now if we want to, but we're going to come back and change one thing. But I just want to show you how we're going to build the pattern to start. Okay, so I have my object selected. I'm going to go Object, Pattern, Make, and I've already sort of worked out the dimensions here on this. So we're going to have a grid, and I want the width to be 4.125 inches and the height to be 3.75 inches. You can see it's an interlocking pattern. It actually looks pretty good. Now the thing is, I'm not sure what's going on here. I'm going to fix this. But these look like they're interlocking, but the whole pattern doesn't look like it's interlocking. So we need to add a couple other changes to that. And so I'm going to exit out of this, cancel. And the way to check that is to just make copies of this to see where the intersections aren't working. So I'm going to select my three objects, and I'm going to go Object, Transform, Move. And it brings up the Move palette, and I want to move this horizontally 4.125. Preview it. So that moves it horizontally. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to select them both. And I'm going to go Transform, Move. And this time we're going to go, no change in the horizontal position, but the vertical position we're going to go 3.75. And make a copy of that, because I want to see how these are going to link. Right here, this needs to cross in front like that. So I'm going to need to make this section of my original three rings. These are my original three rings. I need to make this green here. And also, I need to make this section here of my original green rings also green. And this I'm going to keep red, this section here. And that'll make it intersect. So I got to do a little bit more with my Pathfinder. So now I'm going to use the Pathfinder tool again. Now, basically, you just have to kind of delete and add some shape. I just needed this one to be green. This still needs to be red, so I'm going to select that. Eyedropper tool, make that red. Okay. And now we're going to get rid of this one because we don't need this in the pattern. We just need to change those 2 points, those 2 little sections. So then here, right here, this has to be green. So I'm going to okay, so it's just these 2 areas right here. Now, let's take a look at that pattern again. We're going to do the same thing, but this time they should interlock the way we want them to. So I'm going to select the whole project again. Now I'm going to go to my Shape Builder tool, and I'm going to select all. The other way to do that would be just to simply select the color that you want, and then say Select, Same Fill Color. Okay, and then Unite. So that unites that into a single shape. Okay, so now our shape is clean. I'm going to select my object again. Object, Pattern, Make. So width is 4.125 height is 3.75. Okay, and now they're linking exactly the way we want them to. This is a really like tiling pattern. So this actually looks really good. 70s rings. Okay, that's kind of where it's going. 70s rings. So that's that pattern. And I have the pattern saved. An active layer here. 70s rings. We've got this nice interlocking pattern. I'm going to make it a fill. I'm going to send it to the back. And there's our pattern, right? Okay, now that we've got our pattern working and everything, what I want to do is just show you how to add a little bit of extra dimension to the interlocking pattern to give it a little bit more depth. So the first thing we want to do is we basically are just going to add some a darker shade, these shades here behind the green here, to kind of imply more that we have that things are overlapping each other. So that's all going to be accomplished through a series of sort of masks and additional layers. So let's do that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my base pattern. I'm going to call it base pattern. And I'm going to do, maybe if I spell it the way with proper caps. Okay, base pattern. And then I'm going to create a duplicate of this layer, and I'm going to call this masks. And I'm actually going to use a couple different versions of that. Let's just start by adding some darkness behind this, behind the green here. So add a little bit of red darkness here and a little bit of red darkness there, and that'll be our first one. And then we'll do a version with some green and some yellow. So there'll be 3 separate layers, all with their own darkness, and then it'll all be masked out and it'll look seamless once it's done. You know, I could do this with like a gradient or something like that, but I think I'm just gonna, because it's fabric, so we're just gonna try to make it look a little bit organic. So if I come in here with my paintbrush tool, and let's see here, I've got my paintbrush set to, the fidelity set to smooth, and I'm just going to go in here and add a little bit of dark texture to that there, right? And then I'm going to blur it a little bit just to give it a little bit of, you'll see how this works here. So I'm just adding a little bit of additional color here, and so we're going to add a little bit of paint here. You know, I'm just going to call this my red darken. I'm going to create a new layer for it. Red darken. So that's my darken layer. Turn my base pattern off, and I'm just going to select these and add an effect of blur. So Gaussian blur. Okay, that's a little more than I want. I just want a little bit, and then I can adjust it here. So there's the blur, okay? That's on its own layer. We're going to make this a multiply in the transfer function, so I'm going to bring up my transparency and say that it's going to multiply. Duplicate my masks layer again and just call this one red masks. Turn it on and see what I need to mask here. Okay, so I don't need any of these yellow layers, so I'm going to get rid of those. So I need to create an object that is both black and white, and you'll see why in a second. So okay, and just lock that. It's just there so I can see these. Okay, so I'm going to make all my green 100% black, same full color. Make that 100% black, and all my white, or all my salmon color here, 100% white. Okay, see what I did there? So all I did is I made the area that I want to cover it, to basically hide it. I made that 100% black, and the area I wanted to show it, make it 100% white. And I'm going to select them all again and create masks. Okay, and now if I turn on my base, now I've got some shadow. See how that works? And we're just going to lighten it up a little bit, make it like, let's just make it 70%. Okay, good. Now I'm just going to do the same thing with the other two sets of colors. And I'll speed it up so you can see it. Okay, so now we see I just added these little bits of shadow behind, just to give it a little bit more depth, and they've all been masked. So we've got the red layer, the green layer, and the yellow layer, and it's easy to do. You just have to, it's just to take some work with some layers and things like that, but you get a nice effect there. Now I'm just going to go back in and create that same pattern, but now with this extra dimension, and see what results we get. I think it's going to look really nice. And then object, pattern, make. And we're going to just set the same parameters as we did before. 4.125 by 3.75. Okay. So we're going to call the 70s rings dimension, because they have a little bit more dimension to them. Okay, so there we go. There's this kind of cool 70s textile pattern here. All right, so that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you found it informative. Building these sort of interlocking geometric patterns are really interesting and challenging and fun to do. So I encourage you to try it out if you can. My name is Jim DiGiovanni. This is DiGiovanni Design, and I hope you enjoyed this. And I'll give you the obligatory like and subscribe message. And I really appreciate you checking it out. And thanks for watching.